Hello, everyone. If you just joined us, welcome to the Red Room of this Tradition 5 Roundup. I'm full of malarkey and I'm an alcoholic. In a few minutes, we're going to join Tim M. from London, England, and Joe McF from Fort Davis, Texas, with their 12-step presentation on our 12 steps. We should begin in a few minutes. Okay, our panelists, are Tim M. and Joe McF in the room?
I'm here. I'm Tim.
I'm here. I'm
Good.
here.
Welcome, guys. Tim and Joe are both present, and they are going to educate us with their presentation on 12 steps. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
So Joe and I have agreed that I'm going to start off, and then Joe is going to correct all the mistakes I made. I'm going to talk about the first 9 steps first. Then he's going to talk about the first 9 steps. I'm going to cover the last 3 steps, and he's going to cover the last 3 steps. So my name is Tim. I'm an alcoholic. My date of sobriety is the hello everyone. My date of sobriety is the 24th of July 1993. And my home group is the Hoxton Big Book Step, which meets on a Friday night in London. And before we even talk about the steps, the question is, why are we talking about the steps? Why did I need the steps in my life in the first place? And I had a number of years of drinking during the 1980s. I'm heading towards 50 now. I had a number of years of drinking, which led me to a specific point in June of 1990, when I said, the consequences alcohol is giving me are too much. I was becoming psychotic and violent when drunk. It was taking me to another world I couldn't properly come back from. My mind was starting to unravel. It's like the bricks were still in the wall, but the cement was being gradually dissolved by alcohol. And I said, I will never drink again. And I was all right for 3 months. But in the September, I started again. And this cycle carried on for another 3 years. The latter part of that 3 years was in AA. And I was doing much of what people said around me. I was going to meetings, I was sharing at meetings, I was doing service, I was talking to people, I was reading the literature, I had a sponsor. I didn't know what to do with my sponsor other than literally turn up on his doorstep at 11 o'clock at night saying, if you don't let me in, I will drink. And he let me in, which is an Al-Anon slip, just know that. And I kept drinking again. And my drinking really started to frighten me around the middle of 1993, because I could be in an AA meeting at 12 o'clock midday and be drunk by 1:30 and arrested by 2. And I started to see people around me drink and die the same day, or die within 2 weeks, or try to come back to AA and be unable to. It was like they were on the other side of a glass window and we could tap, but we couldn't touch each other. People were just gone. The problem that I had, I was starting to realize its magnitude by July 1993. And I recognized that if I didn't do something pretty serious, I may never come back from my slipping. And the only thing I hadn't tried in AA was the steps as a systematic, full program of action. I'd taken parts of AA piecemeal, but I hadn't bought the whole deal. I didn't think much of the God business. I treated it as an intellectual academic exercise, but I didn't give myself to it. So the purpose of doing the steps was simply, I took it on trust. I was going to very strong meetings. I was surrounded by very strong people, and they said, do the steps. So I did the steps. Why? Because they were sober and I was not. This is the first higher authority I had in AA, was I granted people the right to override my best thinking on the basis that they were doing better than me, A, in terms of alcohol, and B, in terms of everything else. These were people who were cheerful, were relaxed, were competent, and I trusted them. I didn't have any notion of a higher power, but I trusted them. So the first 9 steps, here's a curious thing about the steps. What the book tells me, by the way, that's where they hid the instructions for the 12 steps. In case you were wondering where they were, that's where they hid them. They didn't tell anyone. That's where they are. It says in step 12, as the result of these steps, we're going to have a spiritual awakening. And the result of the spiritual awakening is that I have a spiritual defense against a drink, in that if the thought of a drink occurs to me, I will recoil from it as if from a hot flame. That's a visceral response to alcohol. It's not an intellectual, reasoned response. I've had experiences when I was close to drinking, and this is many years sober, close to drinking, and spontaneously the thought of what it did, what it would do to others around me in AA if I drank, was enough to produce that visceral reaction. But I didn't call up, I didn't bring this visceral reaction up from within me. It was there, because I have no agency in that moment. So the purpose of the 12 steps is to bring about that awakening, that connection with a higher realm which pours into me at the right moment and provides me with guidance at the right moment. That is the purpose of the 12 steps. But how do you stay sober long enough to even get to step 12? This is the curious thing. My experience and observation over the last 27 years is that it's like pedaling an old bicycle with a dynamo with the light. If you're pedaling hard enough, the light comes on. And that's enough with the fellowship of the people around you who are trying to live this program. My experience and observation is that is sufficient to keep you going until you're mainlining God. So the first 9 steps are there to essentially free me from the bondage of self, from, as my sponsor put it, the bloated nothingness of self, trapped in this little bubble where the world is over there and simply a source of gain or a threat. That was the world and everyone in it. I transacted with it, but I was not part of it. The first 9 steps reconnect me with the world, and in reconnecting me with the world, they reconnect me with the higher power. I believe I had a connection as a kid. Wasn't a strong one, but it was there. I had intuitive moments. There was a sense of goodness in the world before I drank. There was other stuff too. So the job is to reconnect me. So to cover the first 9 steps in brief, I mean, it's a difficult brief. I've got 14 minutes left on this, 13 minutes left on this. Step 1 is really simple for me. I'm powerless over the first drink and I'm powerless after the first drink. What does that mean? That means there's a little demon in my mind which at some point is going to say, hey, a drink would be a great idea. This is a delusion because a drink was not a good idea. I break out in arrests and ambulances when I drink. So a drink is not a good idea. It is a delusion that it is a good idea. But this idea will persistently recur. When it talks in the big book about a mental obsession, it doesn't mean preoccupation. It means a persistently recurring idea, which, when it occurs, overpowers me. If I am in the habit of following what my mind tells me to do, I will drink. So I've got to be in the habit of not doing what my mind says, of following principle, other people, the higher power, anything but me. That was my first higher power in AA, anything but me. Anyway, back to step 1. I am doomed to drink because I can't control the thoughts that come into my mind. I need a power to enable me not to do what comes into my mind. And this is matched with powerlessness after the first drink, which means I can't choose to stop drinking. Drink throws me back up onto the beach. So I must never drink again, but I'm going to. That's step 1. And the unmanageability has got nothing to do with my neurosis or incompetence or disorganization. There are plenty of people who are powerless over alcohol, who are competent, organized, and relatively well balanced emotionally, but they are powerless over alcohol. Unmanageability for me is I'm not in charge of the course of my life, because if that demon kicks in and I'm in the habit of following what goes on in my head, I'm toast. I'm literally not in charge of the course of my life without a higher power. So that being the case, I need to access this power greater than myself. I don't need a notion of physics in order to switch on a kettle and boil some water. I need to know where the switch is. I need to know how to fill the kettle. And step 2 was really simple for me when I was new. I remember being in a meeting with 120 people, looking round, thinking, I don't believe this is a conspiracy, that they've got together to fool me, to trick me that they're sober. They are sober, and they're telling me they could not stop drinking for years, for decades. Therefore, they now have a power that they didn't have before. That's one corner of the whole tablecloth of the higher power. I just needed to tug on that corner and the rest of the tablecloth came with it. I don't need to understand the whole picture. I just needed to recognize that there was power available and that it was available universally. So when it says in step 2 that God is everything or God is nothing, either God is available to everyone or it's some weird selective phenomenon. And the observation around me was that anyone seems to be able to get sober if they take a few simple actions. So it's not selective, it's universal. Emmett Fox talks about this notion of God being principle, and a principle is something which stands under all circumstances, which does not bow to circumstances. And that was my higher power, a higher power of principle. If it works for you, it will work for me. Step 3, I mean, yes, it's a decision to get on with the rest of the program, but there is an internal surrender which takes place. And the internal surrender was, I never need to make another decision again. I make one decision now, which is to turn my will and life over to a power greater than myself. I can literally, in principle, relax forever, because now I have, in order to make decisions, I have principles, I have fellows in AA, I have prayer, I have meditation, and increasingly now I have experience and reason. My reason has come back. And this combination is what I now rely on, with God sitting at the top of the pyramid rather than whatever happens to have come into my thoughts. But also this idea that I'm safe and looked after, I can trust this process, was immensely important as part of step 3. I'm going to make 2 non-conference approved references. The first one is go and watch Frozen 2. There is a song in it, do the next right thing. The next indicated action. What is the next indicated action? The action that the program asks me to do. It doesn't matter what I feel. It doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter what my opinion is. I'm going to do it. I don't have a vote. And also, if you don't like Frozen 2, you'll love Onward, which is the other animated film that's come out. It's got step 3 all the way through. This abyss with a bridge, but the bridge doesn't appear. The bridge is invisible, but you have to step into the abyss for the bridge to catch you. And that's exactly what step 3 was for me. But the purpose of this was to really enter into a process to switch around my relationship with the universe 180 degrees. When I got to AA in 1993, my concern, what I thought about was my welfare and your conduct. And this needed to be flipped. So I was concerned with your welfare and my conduct. This is not an easy learn. It requires very concrete, specific steps to bring it about, because there is the monstrosity of my ego in the way. And that's what steps 4 through 9 are about. They're a thermonuclear device that I want to set off at the heart of my ego so that I can be freed from it. Step 4 has a number of different inventories. An inventory is simply a list of things. That's all it is, a list of things, not an analysis, a list. We can all make a list. And I'm not going to go into the mechanics of how to do it, but I'm going to say what I learned from it. From the resentment inventory, so-called resentment inventory, which is the first part, I learned that my feelings are my responsibility, not yours. How does that work? I felt my whole life that you were behaving a certain way, and that made me feel something. I even used the phrase, that makes me feel budum. Not true. I sowed landmines throughout the whole world. The rest of the world would walk through this field of landmines. When they stepped on the landmine, I would blow up. Not them, me. What is the landmine? Any demand or expectation that someone behave in a particular way. I needed to get rid of the landmines, the demands and the expectations, if I wanted to not be a glove puppet to other people's bad behavior. The book doesn't say that other people are angels and saints. It says the world and its people are often quite wrong. I don't want to be the schmuck whose emotions are just totally dictated by other people's schmuckish behavior. I don't want to be that person. I want to be someone who is poised in all circumstances. Next lesson, fear, the fear inventory. I learned that my fear was based on self. What is self? Self is a reliance on my material life, my physical form, my physical circumstances, my appearance in the world, my reputation, that self. Those things can all be damaged. If I'm reliant on those for my purpose, my identity, my happiness, my security, because those things are vulnerable fundamentally. If you're not frightened, you're psychotic, you're missing something. I needed to have my identity in God. I'm spirit, that's it. That can't be hurt. My job here is to give. No one can stop me giving. My job is to love. No one can stop me loving. With my identity and my purpose secure in God and in my mission on earth, there is never anything to be frightened of. Take my life. I don't care. I was done when I got to AA. I'm really done now. I'm just happy to have the opportunity every day and in every way to carry on giving. That's the answer to fear. Guilt and shame. I was supposed to feel guilt and shame for how I treated people in the world and how I mentally treated them with this incessant stream of attack thoughts. The other part of the inventory is to look at where my beliefs, my thinking, and my behavior are wrong. Those are the only three levers that I can pull. So I need to pull those levers. I can't change how I feel. I can't change the thought that knocks on the door. I can choose whether to let it in and give it a cup of tea. But I can change, with God's help, with the help of AA, I can change my beliefs, my thinking, and my behavior. But I needed to find out what needed to change. To cover the other steps, in step 5, read out what's on your step 4. If it's long, summarize it. Very simple. Exact nature of my wrongs, twists of character, dark crannies of the past. Page 75. The instructions for step 5 are one line. Twists of character, dark crannies of the past. Those little twists of character are going to make a reappearance in step 6. I've got 2 buttons in step 6. Do I want to keep this way of life, or do I want to get rid of it, get a new way of life? There is no line of communication between the 2 systems. The system of ego has nothing to do with the system of God. I've got to pick one. So step 6. If step 6 isn't a dummy question, you've missed something in the first 5 steps. My answer in step 6 has to be hell yeah. And then I get to step 7. I heard it described as step 3 with teeth. It's step 3, but now we have the data. The data are in, they've been examined, the conclusions are clear. So it's a deeper commitment to the rest of the program. I don't get rid of my character defects in terms of the roots, but I do have to take the initiative to change my beliefs, my thinking, and my behavior with God's help. God will do for me what I cannot do for myself, but God won't do for me what I can do for myself. If I'm late, I need to learn to go to bed earlier, set an alarm, and get up when the alarm goes off. God will not get me out of bed. I have to get my little fat legs flung over the side of the bed and stand up and going. I have to do that. No one is going to do that for me. Pookie from Austin, I met her once. I quote her every day. You got to take action to activate your faith. God ain't going to slide no hot dog under your door. So to enact that, I've got to take steps 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. We're going to cover 10, 11, and 12 later. But 8 and 9, step 8, what did I do? Not what did I think, what did I feel, what did I do? What should I have done instead? Ask an adult. Just ask an adult. When you're doing step 8, ask a grown-up, what should I have done instead? Because you will have no clue. And then who suffered and how? If they suffered, you make an amend. Now that means to undo, to repair the harm. Sometimes that's an overt conversation. Sometimes it needs to be attacked on the flank, but the harm needs to be repaired. Subtlety, tact, discretion, consideration, humility are just as important as barging in with a great big evangelical message. But I completed my steps 8 and 9. The lights turned on and I haven't looked back. That's 7 seconds short of 20 minutes. Joe, I think it's over to you now.
Thank you, Tim. That was incredible. Thank you so much, buddy. Let's see. Okay, I guess you can hear me, Tim? Okay. Okay, hi y'all. I'm Joe and I'm a grateful alcoholic, and I am in Austin, Texas right now, my home in Austin, Texas. My home group is in Fort Davis, where my other home is, and it's the Turning Point group of Alcoholics Anonymous in Fort Davis. If you're ever out there, please come by and visit us. I sponsor, and I am sponsored. My sponsor is in Minneapolis. His name is Bill D, and hopefully he's watching today. this is an incredible event. You know, Bill had the foresight. I'm sure he's like a rotisserie in his grave right now. And when he wrote in 1960, nothing matters more to AA's future welfare than the manner in which we use the colossus of modern communication. Used unselfishly and well, it can produce results surpassing our present imagination. And I'd like to thank Linda for asking me to come and share this with Tim. Tim is just incredible, and I love Tim, and it's just an honor to be here. What I thought I'd do is, you know, with 20 minutes isn't a lot of time to cover all 12 steps. So I thought what I'd do was break it down and share my experience with the steps. You know, I'm a low bottom drunk. I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, busted, disgusted, not to be trusted. I suffered from self-loathing. I didn't know what that big word meant. It was extreme contempt, disgust, and hatred for myself. I was a failure in every department of my life. I kept going to nut houses. I kept going to have shock treatments. I went in and out of spin dries. I went to therapists. I've been to priests, preachers, evangelists. I've been dipped, dunked, and sprayed. Nothing worked. I went to treatment. They'd send me to that stupid AA. I'd go to AA. I would hear people talk about the 12 stairs of Alcoholics Anonymous, and then I'd hear them go out to meetings afterwards. They'd go out to meetings, and I kept getting drunk. Now, they always pointed at this big book. They always wanted me to read the big book, read the big book. Well, look how thick it is. But I have news for you. That's the recovery portion of this book. It's 103 pages plus the 16 pages of the doctor's opinion. My life changed the minute that I committed to 119 pages of recovery. Steps 1 through 12 lead to a spiritual experience. Now, what is the catalyst for someone taking those 12 steps? And that's what I'd like to share with you this evening about. Every action in AA, every piece of literature in Alcoholics Anonymous, and all 12 steps ask me to take actions. The 12 and 12 says all of AA's 12 steps asks me to take actions that go contrary to my emotional desires. They all deflate the ego. Every action in AA in the beginning and will always be based on my first step experience. And that first step experience is the launch fuel to vigorous action. You know, it says in the big book on page 25, we have found much of heaven and we have been rocketed into a dimension of existence of which we had not even dreamed. The rocket fuel for that is your first step experience. See, when AA, you know, we've got great 12-steppers in here, and a lot of people say that AA has two co-founders, Dr. Bob and, of course, Bill Wilson. But I kind of think that it's got three. And until our best 12-stepper gets through with its job, we can't start ours, and that's alcohol. Nothing in the world will get someone to take the 12 steps better than a good ass whooping by alcohol. And that's what it took for me. The other thing I always like to say before I ever start is I suffer from, when I came in, I suffered from alcoholism. And I never, ever, ever, ever will get away from suffering from alcoholism. I don't ever have alcoholism. I have alcoholism. It says selfishness and self-centeredness, that we think is the root of all our troubles. And so that's, so there's two people I'd like to talk to tonight. Maybe there's a newcomer here who has been going to AA and it hasn't got it. Just keeps going, keeps going, keeps going, keeps slipping, keeps slipping. You go to meetings, these people talk about keep coming back. They go out for pudding afterwards, and then they go home to their wife and they got a great life. And then they come back. I go home, I want to hang myself. I go home, I suffer the pangs of anxious apartness. I feel restless, irritable, discontented. And that's when I'm sober. And I used to drink and I'd get that euphoric omnipotence and I'd feel wonderful. But now I can't even do that. because I'll have brief periods of recovery followed always still by worse relapse, which in time leads me to that pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. Now, let me say something about that. Pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization is an acronym, and that acronym is simply PAID, pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. Now, in Alcoholics Anonymous, they'll tell you that there are no dues or fees, and that may be true. And we have a seventh tradition where we're fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. But in my personal experience, I feel that there is an initiation cost for Alcoholics Anonymous, and until we pay that, we're not going to get ready to take the 12 steps. We're not going to be willing to take the 12 steps. And that is that pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. And a lot of us die before we get that. Now, and that's PAID, pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. Now, the first step, that experience that's the catalyst that's going to take me through all of the other 12 steps. And everything in my life is based on, if I ever have a problem with doing an inventory, it's not a problem with the inventory. It's a problem with the first step. If I ever got a problem with the second, third, fourth, all the way up to 12, it's not a step problem. It is a step one problem. And I believe that in Alcoholics Anonymous, we get people who come in, and if they're properly armed, our job is when we meet people in Alcoholics Anonymous, take them through the steps so that they can pass this on. We become Johnny Appleseeds of sobriety, and we start just planting orchards all over. That's our job description in Alcoholics Anonymous, to have a spiritual experience so that we can carry this message to other people. The doctor's opinion, from the doctor's opinion to page 43, that's 59 pages of the big book. That's step one. That's over half of the 103 pages that is dedicated to step one. Now, Bill Wilson said something that was very good. He said, you can't make a horse drink water if he still prefers beer or is still too crazy to know what he does want. All you can do is set a pail beside him and tell him how good it is and why, and leave him alone. And that's what they did, and it like to killed me. I couldn't believe I was going to Alcoholics Anonymous and I was not drinking and I was miserable, and all these other people were happy. And I was in a big book study, and in the doctor's opinion, it said there are many situations which arise out of the phenomenon of craving. Now, what does that mean? Which caused these men to make the supreme sacrifice rather than go on fighting. That means that the step one is broken down into two parts. I'm powerless over alcohol, dash, our lives have become unmanageable. What is that powerless over alcohol? I've got a physical craving that if I put it in my body, that I'm going to manifest a phenomenon of craving. And this separates me as a distinct entity from all other people. Doctor's opinion, Dr. Silkworth says that. When I put it in my body, I'm going to manifest the phenomenon of craving, and I got to drink it, don't matter what it's going to cost me. Now, the answer to that is not put it in your body. And if you don't put it in your body, you're not going to have the physical craving. Class dismissed. Wrong. Unfortunately, I suffer from something much more worse. You know, I suffer from, it's a physical craving, and a phenomenon of craving that if I put it in my body, I manifest it, and I gotta have it. But if I don't put it in my body, I don't have that craving. Now, if I put it in my body, all bets are off. If I don't, if I'm going to AA, I'm going to meetings, I'm being good, 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 until I can't stand it, that's the mental obsession. I got a body that tells me I can't drink. I got a mind that tells me I must. That's the main problem. It tells us on page 23. These observations would be academic and pointless if the alcoholic didn't take the first drink, thereby setting this terrible cycle in motion. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than his body. You see, there's two things that there's no cure for ever in the history of man, probably. The first one is body odor. That's why we go to meetings and we hear, rarely have we seen a person smell who has thoroughly taken our bath. That's just a joke. It says, I can get rid of the body odor, but I'm the last one to notice I got it. The other thing is my alcoholism. All I get on that, and all we offer here in Alcoholics Anonymous, is a daily reprieve contingent upon the maintenance of my spiritual condition. Me alone and unaided trying to manage that puts me way out there, and I can't do it. So the doctor's opinion says there are many situations which arise out of the phenomenon of craving, which cause men to make the supreme sacrifice rather than go on fighting. That's where I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't know. The big book tells us that until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. And then it tells us the main thing is that I be willing to believe in a power greater than myself and live by spiritual principles. And I didn't know what spiritual principles were. And then I read on page 43 that quite as important to discover the spiritual principles will solve all my problems. Well, what? That's my problem. I can't drink and I can't not drink, and trying to manage it is horrible. And then I found out that in the forward of the 12 and 12, it says AA's 12 steps are a group of principles, spiritual in nature, if practiced as a way of life, can expel the obsession to drink, enable the sufferer to live a happily and useful life. Now, I'm going to ask you something. If you go to the forward to the second edition, it's going to give us our recovery rate in Alcoholics Anonymous. And which are you going to be? Are you going to be the 50%, the 25%, or are you going to be those who improved, who stayed on? It says, of alcoholics who came to AA and really tried, and that's a caveat, 50% got sober at once and remained that way. 25% got sober after some relapses. And among the remainder, those who stayed showed improvement. Now, that is really important, because of those who really tried, what's that look like? I didn't know. I didn't know what really tried. I just went to meetings. I was a fellowship fringer. I'd go to meetings. I'd listen to them. I'd be drunk. I'd be there trying to pick up girls. I never really was. But I met somebody, and this was a guy I knew. I got out of the state hospital from 81 days, 37 electric shock treatments. I knew it was over with for me. I knew that I was beyond recall. And I went into Club 12, and there would be people leaving. And I went there for like 2 weeks, and that's the most I ever got, like from 1993, 1980 to 1993, 13 years. And the most I ever got was a few weeks. And I knew that I was going to go off. And I met a guy named Ed, and he had met a guy named Mark and Joe. And Ed was telling me that, you know, Joe, if you remove the alcohol from the alcoholic, all you have left is the ick. And he says, this guy I met was telling me the elimination of our drinking is just but a beginning. We need to do much more. There's much more important things to do. And he says, when you're sober, that, alcohol will eventually do to anybody what it's done to you if they drink enough. But it only does for you if you're an alcoholic. He goes, your problem isn't alcohol, it was your solution. And your problem is when you don't, that solution no longer works. And he says, the unmanageability of that step one, the second half, is the bedevilments. You're having trouble with personal relations. You can't control your emotional nature. You're a prey to misery and depression. You're feeling useless. You're full of fear. You're unhappy. Can't be of real help. No one wants to be around you. You're a jerk. And I said, yeah, that's me. He says, well, that's when AA starts. And he took me over, and I met a guy named Mark up in Kerrville, and he sat down and he says, Joe, and he says, quite frankly, the first step is we're trying to get you to convince you that your situation is a lot worse than you think it is, because you can't differentiate true from the false. And consequently, step one is something you have to take 100%. Almost don't cut it. Almost getting sober is like almost having a parachute if your plane blows up in midair. So what I did is I went over and when we talked, and he said, Joe, if your main problem is your thinking, in other words, page 23, where it says the main problem centers in your mind, why would you go to the source of your problem, your thinking, your mind, for a solution to your thinking. You can't fix your malfunctioning mind with your malfunctioning mind. You need to bring it to your creator. And that's exactly what these 12 steps are about. And so we got together, we started a group called the Truth Seekers, because we couldn't differentiate the true from the false. There were 81 of us hopeless societal throwaways, beyond recall. People told us, all the newcomers, stay away from those people, they're losers. And we were. We just didn't really think there was anything hope. We kept going in and out of nut houses, streets. I was a vagrant. I was living on the streets. I had nothing. I weighed 370 pounds. And I got together with all these people, and we started a group called the Truth Seekers. And we met once a week. We were 81 hopeless, beyond recall, full of futile attempts to help us, from loved ones, family, legal, institutions, careers. We lost it all. Therapeutic communities, all of it have failed. We were what Dr. Silkworth referred to, the general opinion by the medical, is that we were chronic alcoholics and doomed. We were the bottom feeders of society. We would start a meeting, and we began that meeting with 10 minutes of silent meditation, and then we started something that no one had ever heard of before, that Danny S. started, and it was the set-aside prayer. And as a group, we said, dear God, please help us set aside everything we think we know about our disease, the big book, the 12 steps, the program, the fellowship, the people in AA, and all spiritual terms, and especially you, God, so I may have a new experience with all these things. Please help me see the truth. And then we took, as a group, we went through the big book as a group, page per page. And we thought, and as a group, we decided reading the big book is a waste of time unless you're going to do the big book. And an example of that is we use first party possessive pronoun. Now get this, when we did a third step as a group, the first requirement is that Joe be convinced that his life run on self-will could hardly be a success. On that basis, Joe is almost always in collision. You take ownership of that, and there's no wiggle room with these guys. And then after we got through with that about this is how and why of it, first off, Joe had to quit playing God. It didn't work. Do I believe that? And we went around the whole group and asked every one of us. And if there was one of us not convinced, we would stop and we would read it again, and then we would ask if we could have spiritual consent, and we would all talk, and we would decipher the true from the false, or was it a delusion? Now, we did this, and we did exactly what the big book suggested, exactly verbatim as a group, everything it said as a group. We asked ourselves, does this really apply to us? We had litter mates. We asked if, and we would call 3 people every day, and every week we changed this group. This kept things fresh and kept us dealing deep and real friendships, even decades later. We did multiple 5th steps and shared as a group when we made amends, and we were all accountable to the group every week where we were. Now, as a result of that, 81 of us, 26 years later, 67 of us are either still sober or died sober. 67% out of 81 is an 82.7% recovery rate. Now I ask you, which one are you going to be? And this has really, let me see, I think I got 5 more minutes, don't I, Tim? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and this is so important. When I sat down with Mark and I got my big book and I brought it up right there in the very front page here where there's nothing, he had me write, because I was desperate. I was willing to do anything. He said, Joe, are you willing to go to any lengths for victory over alcohol? I said, yes, and he had me write it down right there in that blank page. And then he says, are you willing, have you decided to go to any lengths to find a spiritual experience? And I said, yes. And I wrote it down. He said, then sign it. Now that's on page 76 and 79. And it says, remind the prospect of 2 things that they bought. Remind them that it was agreed in the beginning that they would go to any lengths for victory over alcoholism and any lengths to find a spiritual experience. And that's my experience. Now, I did a lot of things. Going to meetings doesn't mean you're in recovery. Taking the 12 steps is the program of recovery. You can go to meetings. It's just saying, hey, I'm in recovery, I'm going to meetings. That's bullshit. That's like what if you went up and said, hey, I went to sleep in my garage last night. I'm a car. People think you're crazy, and that's what old timers think you are when you just say you're going to meetings. I got a circle and a triangle. There's unity, service, recovery, steps, traditions, concepts, mind, body, spirit, work, play, love, home, occupation, and affairs. It really comes multidimensional. And once I started doing that, I was able, and here's the deal, and I'll close and give it back to Tim, is once I took the 12 steps took me on a ride that is beyond. I was awarded the state of Texas MHMR, that stands for mental health, mental retardation. I was busted, disgusted. I was on SSI. I was on the sick, getting checked from the government every month. I am now a duly sworn in and elected public official in the state of Texas. And that's what AA's done, and that's what the 12 steps have done for me. And with that, I'll give it to Tim. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Joe. Joe's been sober, I think, 6 weeks longer than me, and I think you'll agree it shows. He mentioned Club 12 in San Antonio. I've been to Club 12 in San Antonio. I don't know what they made of me, but I know what I made of it. They had a sign on the door which said no handguns allowed in the clubhouse. In London, we have signs saying no bicycles allowed in the meeting space. So there's a slight cultural difference there. Steps 10, 11, and 12. My life looks very much like it did maybe 16, 17 years ago. So 16, 17 years ago, I was sober, what, 10 years, 11 years. I have the same job as back then. I live in the same apartment. I have the same partner. We're now married. My family is the same. One of them is in recovery now. That's the only difference. But I discovered a problem. 10 years sober, 11 years sober, 12 years sober, compulsive behavior, compulsive obsessions with people, with my weight physically, with all sorts of weird mental crap. And I thought, what am I doing wrong here? I've been sober 10, 11 years. I'm doing a shed load of service in AA. I'm sponsoring a few people. I'm going to lots of meetings. I'm sharing at meetings. I try and share a message. I'm reading all sorts of non-conference approved literature. What's going wrong here? And imagine you work for a company and you've been to the head office, but the last time you were in the head office was, I don't know, 10 years ago. And occasionally you read about the company you work for in the paper, but you're just in the field. There's no communication with your line manager. You're just in there. You're going to get worn down. And I was worn down. I had no connection to my source. I was living on yesterday's bread. I was doing a lot of things right on the outside, but the inside was, there were parts of me that were well, there were parts of me which were broken and crumbling. Now, this should have been enough to push me deeper into the program. It took about 3 or 4 years of that and trying all sorts of things. I went to Al-Anon and got a great deal of help from Al-Anon, which was necessary. I listened to some great speakers. But what I did at 15 years is I found a set of tapes made by the people that Joe was talking about. So a chap called Joe, a chap called Mark. They referenced some other people. They referenced Don P, and a whole load of people up the chain to Paul M from Chicago, who talked about multiple fifth steps, who talked about completing every single last amend, to go deep into your consciousness, all of the relationships, present and past, where there is any kind of tension or guilt or shame or embarrassment or regret, and say to the higher power, what can we do about this? And Mark would tell a story. Trying to make amends for everything you've ever done wrong is like going to the top of the Empire State Building and taking a pillow and cutting it open and having all of the feathers fly everywhere, and then the task is to collect all the feathers back. Looks impossible until you realize what you're dealing with the higher power. Page 85, the source of all knowledge and power. That's all knowledge and power, not some knowledge and power. If you could have a relationship with the creator of all of those feathers, do you think you might have more of a chance then? And people popped up out of the pavement, I tell you. But anyway, cut a long story short, I scoured my consciousness and found so many people I'd missed off the first round of amends, so many people that I'd created bad relationships with over the previous 15, 16 years of recovery. I completed the list. I'd had a good go at step 9 the first time, which is what kept me sober, I think. I did step 9 to the best of my ability based on the information that was around me at the time. Someone quoted Wino Joe yesterday. The two things that will kill alcoholics are alcohol and bad information. And I had mixed information in my first few years. I got a crystal clear message at 15 years sober. What's interesting to me as well is I wasn't taken through the steps by a sponsor at 15 years. I had tapes of 9 or 10 people, of step studies, of big book weekends where they went through the detail. I wrote down everything they said and did it. I found people to share the step 5 with. I found people to consult with on step 9. One of the things I learned about step 12 is people don't take me through the steps. I take myself through the steps, and you give me guidance. You show me how to do it. You give me some instructions, but the desire must come from within. It's got to come from me. I've got to take responsibility for the process. And it's, you know, I needed a huge amount of help at 1 year sober. At 15 years sober, I was able to work off the tapes and some people around me to give guidance on practical matters. But what happened, the reason I tell that story is that at 15, 16 years, I woke up. And what waking up is not necessarily comfortable. I don't know how you feel first thing in the morning. I don't always feel super comfortable when I've just woken up. And a spiritual awakening can be a little bit like that. There's a line that I say, a prayer that I say every morning as part of my tradition, which says something to the effect of, God, thanks for giving my soul back. And that's what happened when I completed step 9. Getting my soul back was not comfortable. It was great on one level. My emotions, the emotional stability was extraordinary compared to what I had been suffering. And the compulsions and obsessions just dropped away from me like scales. But what came with that awakening was the realization that there was a lot of suffering in the world. And I didn't have like a messianic mission here, but I had a job to do. So a friend of mine says that there was a rabbi in Poland in, I think, the 18th century who had a piece of paper in 2 pockets. In his left pocket, there was a piece of paper that said, I am the dust of the earth. And on the piece of paper in the other pocket was the line, the universe was created for me. And this is the realization that I take into step 12. Without God, I am nothing, but in God's hands, I can be an intelligent agent of God's ever-advancing creation. What does that mean in practice? As I say, it's nothing grand. It's being available to show people what was shown to me. So to show other people what I heard off tapes, what I learned from Joe, what I've learned from 1,000 other people. I don't give anyone anything. I've compiled the material that was given to me, and I can package it for you, but I didn't originate any of it. I'm a combination of a dinner lady and an Amazon packing person. You know, I just have to pack the products in a way that you can open them. And now, I said my life is not very different. It is different in some ways. I spend many, many more hours sponsoring people, trying to help people in recovery in all sorts of different ways than I did 16 years ago. I think I sponsored 20 people in my first 16 years. It's been about 300 people since my 16th AA birthday. So a lot more time is going into sponsorship. But the real difference is this: the whole basis of my life has changed. It's the line in the big book where it says our feet must be on earth because that's where our work is, which means it's no good me sitting on a cushion for 6 hours a day getting really like comfortable with my inner self. The purpose of meditation, step 11, is from that space to go out there and do stuff in the world, but to keep my head, my consciousness where the higher power is. And I treat my life, my job, I've lost all of my work ambition. My career is going better than it's ever gone before. I have zero ambition for the career, but I have ambition to do each task in front of me to the absolute best of my ability. This is practicing step 12 outside AA. I don't care anymore what the balance is between my activities inside and outside. I just go to God, say, what am I going to do today? What am I going to go? Where am I going to go this week? What am I going to do? Who am I going to talk to? So step 12 has become the entire content of my life. Stay awake. I think that's what we do in AA. We keep each other awake. There's a Star Trek episode where I don't know which iteration of Star Trek it was, but for some reason, everyone is falling asleep. If they fall asleep, they die, and they have to keep each other awake. And that's exactly what we're doing here. So I need to stay awake in step 12. I need to carry this message within AA to help other people wake up, and I need to be of service in the rest of the world. And the method by which I do that is steps 10 and 11. And just to put it very briefly, I get up in the morning. The first thing I say to the higher power after I've said my ordinary morning prayers is, please direct my thinking, so that when I'm planning my day, God is in charge of that. Why do I have to say direct my thinking? It needs directing. You know, it's alcoholism, not alcoholism. My ego, I can give it a haircut, but I can't eliminate it completely. You can yank off its arms and legs, but they grow back. The two organs which regenerate in an alcoholic are the liver and the ego. And this is why I need a fully fledged program at 26, 27 years, exactly the same way that I did at the beginning. Get up in the morning. God, what do you want me to do? Spend time in prayer and meditation, connecting with the higher power, establishing the higher powers, re-establishing the higher powers' authority over me, saying to the higher power this, recognizing that the higher power is the king over my life. And I spent a lot of time doing that because I want the throne. Let me tell you, I'm an aggressive A-type personality. It takes 20 minutes to half an hour in the morning to get me to come down off my little papier-mâché throne and recognize who really belongs up there. And from that position, I can just quietly get on with the tasks of the day. At the end of the day, a little review. The meditation on page 86, the nightly review, is simply to give me some relief, to say to God, I've messed up a few things again, a few things went well, give me some corrective measures for tomorrow, a couple will do. And then step 10 during the day, I do the steps out of the big book, not off the scrolls. What's on the scrolls is an aid memoir for what the step is. It ain't the instruction. It's a summary of the steps. If you have the words Black Forest Gatto, and you just tried to work off that phrase, you would not produce a Black Forest Gatto. And there's a lot of step working off the scrolls. So I do step 10 out of the book. And what that tells me to do is to continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. It's like you're driving a car, you listen for the rumble strips on either side of the carriageway. And when you hear them, you come back on track. I'm just supposed to zoom down the lane I'm in, stay in my own lane, to keep my wind out of other people's sails, to keep other people's wind out of my sails. That's what a lot of step 10 is about. And then I'm going to finish on this idea on the opposite page, on page 85, that every day is a day when I must carry the vision of God's will into all my activities. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. Constantly means all the time. I thought when I took step 3, I would get to do a few little corners of things for God, but basically my life is still my own. My mind is still my own. I reserve the right to think what I want to think. Well, my experience is that I need to do what it says on page 85. And think constantly, what can I contribute to the situation? In letting go of who I thought I was, I have lost nothing. I'm the same person I ever was, but my beliefs are different, my thinking is different, my behavior is different, and as a result, my whole experience of life is different. If it finishes today, I'm fine. If I'm here for another 40 years, it's fine by me. Thy will be done. That's all I've got on those. Joe, back over to you.
Thank you, Tim. One thing I would like to say is that the best definition I've ever had of what a sponsor is was given to me. I went to I was out of town with Clancy, and we went to a movie, and afterwards we went out and had some coffee together, and he said, Joe, he didn't make this up, he heard it somewhere, but it fits so well. A sponsor is someone you share your secret disbeliefs with. And my secret disbelief has always been I'm unlovable. And if you get to know me, you're going to hate me as much as I hate me, because I know I'm a phony. And today I have a life that is beyond my wildest dream. I'm intimate, I'm transparent, and I'm close. AA has given me the ability to have continuity of effort, sincerity of purpose, and clarity of vision in every area of my life, and I'm a free man. But I owe it all by taking all 12 steps. You see, I can't give away what I haven't gotten unless I work the 12 steps on a continuing basis. Lifetime commitment, there are 3 things I won't ever understand: what the message is, how to experience it, and how to help another alcoholic find it. You see, Bill wrote a subtle implication, and it is a warning, and it really, really deserves heeding. In the long form of the 12th tradition, you know, we go to AA and we hear, oh, we're talented people. You never hear anybody outside of Alcoholics Anonymous talking about how talented and smart AA people are. You never hear that. They always say, oh, that son of a bitch, I couldn't stand him. He goes there, he's not drinking or anything. But what we hear in Alcoholics Anonymous is that because the spiritual principles of Alcoholics Anonymous are so strong and powerful, in spite of ourselves, life is going to get good. And the 10th step talks about resting on our laurels. And that means being fat, complacent, and lazy. And not going on a 12-step call, not going to meetings, not doing my nightly reviews, not going to my morning ask and plan my day, staying off all that. It's that SOB calling. He's just a whiner. I'm not going to answer the phone. Bill wrote the subtle implication in the long form of the 12th tradition when he wrote, this to the end, that our great blessings may never spoil us, and we may forever live in thoughtful contemplation under him who presides over us all. You see, I have a natural, I'm a slow learner, but I'm a faster forgetter. I'm one who will be able to just say, I'm doing good now, I got it. And that's when my alcoholism comes in, and I'm headed for trouble, which leads me to the second surrender in Alcoholics Anonymous. I hit a bottom at, I think it was probably 20 years sober. Thank God I had friends. One of them's in this room, flew over and was with me during that time. And two of them are here today on this. And you know, when you hit, because it says, when trouble comes, we cheerfully capitalize. It doesn't say if trouble. I'm going to tell you right now, life comes at you at point blank range. You're not exempt because you're a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Life is going to come up and knock you in the face. And you'd better have a spiritual stockpile one come up. That's what we're taking these 12 steps. That's what we're getting in tune with our Creator. The 10th step tells me that I'm going to clean up my own shitty diapers. I don't blame it on anybody else. Short form of the 10th step is whoops. The 11th step, there are many helpful books. See to it, go to your rabbi, minister, or priest, and they'll give you some. I got involved in a lot of spiritual. I am a pursuer. I am someone who's seeking spirituality. I seek God with all the desperation. I'm a swimmer. I seek God with all the desperation that of a drowning man, like it tells me. Man, I want all the God in the world. And I got two things I have to ask myself every day. Is this complementing my program or contaminating my program? Am I being driven by fear or am I being led by God? And that's where I need steps 10, 11, and 12. And that's where I need a sponsor. Step 10, quite simply, just whoops. And I looked for my PARs and RADs. What are PARs and RADs? That's a good question. I'm glad you asked. PARs and RADs are this. They're acronyms. P-A-R-S, PARs. RADs, R-A-D-S. I listen to my body. I kind of listen to that sixth sense, that intuition that we're in tune with by making all our amends. And I just know an intuition is a knowing you didn't know you knew. Something just says, Joe, don't say that. Don't do that. Okay, so here's how it goes down. I'm listening for my PARs. Page 86, 87, and 88 is PARs and RADs. Pause, PARs. Pause when agitated or doubtful. Ask what he would have me do. R, remind myself that I'm no longer running the show. S, saying, thy will, not mine be done. What are RADs? Same thing on the 4th and 5th step, and then in the 11th step. They ask you to look for those three things. Where am I afraid, dishonest, selfish, and resentful? RADs. Resentful, afraid, dishonest, and fearful. It says afraid. Resentment, afraid, dishonest, and selfish. You look for those, and they'll always show up. Now, one last thing I'd like to say, because we're getting close to the time, is in the fear inventory, it says fear set in motion trains the circumstances we felt we didn't deserve, but did not we set them in motion. There is a principle there I'd like to share with you because it meant so much to me. Dr. Bob says, practice these principles in all of our affairs. Carry this message. Use words only if you must. We have tapped into something here in Alcoholics Anonymous, folks. The word alcohol comes from a word that means spirits. We have tapped into something bigger than you even know. And you can hone that. You keep yourself free, that channel there, that conduit for that power, free in 10. You go into 11 and you get in tune with it. Fear set in motion. Well, let me ask you this. If fear set in motion trains the circumstances we felt we didn't deserve for the bad, what would courage, what would faith, what would enough courage, spiritual fortitude to take action that you know God's behind you and you got the power of the program behind you and you're practicing that in all your affairs? It's like God saying, come on, man, come on, prove me. You got the power. Let's do it. Let's help these people. Dream big. Now, if you take those actions, and what would that set in motion? And by definition, instead of fear setting in motion trains the circumstances for the bad we felt we didn't deserve, but not we set them in motion. What would courage to act on this spiritual principles? You have this the whole universe power behind you coming through you as a sober member. We've been given the power to help others and to carry this message in every one of our affairs. If we got into that power, we tapped into that power, would that bring circumstances we felt we didn't deserve for the good? And by definition, would that be the grace of God, unmerited divine assistance? You see, sin means missing the mark. And Bill talks about the 7 sins, deadly sins in the 12 and 12. You know, the best definition I've ever heard is frustrated potentiality. And what the 12 steps has done is given me efficacy to become happily and usefully whole in all my affairs. And today, sometimes I just have to pinch myself because I can't believe how wonderful life has gotten. And I'd like to close with this. In AA, I believe that we find God and see him in others and eventually in ourselves through the specific sponsor-guided actions of the 12 steps as outlined in the big book, which frees us from the ignorance created by our self-will. We can't do it alone, but by applying the actions of our 12 steps, we are met with God's grace. I find the 12 steps are circular and provide fresh understanding and benefits each time I take them. They give me room within myself to live as a free, functioning human being amongst society. As page 19 says, the much more important areas of home, occupation, and affairs. The more good I look for, the more good I see. And the more good I see, the more good I see everywhere and in everyone. Today, I find perfect peace in things exactly as they are at this particular phase. I enjoy just being and letting others just be. I've noticed that when I'm okay with myself, I find I'm okay with you. And the more I'm okay with you, the more beauty I see. And then one day, all of a sudden, driving home from a service commitment or meeting with a sponsee or going to a meeting, all alone in your car, you're driving and you notice these wet things falling out of your eyes. And you realize how blessed and grateful you are to have witnessed the miracles of recovery and seeing the eyes of men and women open to the wonder as they move from darkness into light, to see their lives quickly fill with new purpose and meaning, to see whole families reassembled, to see the alcoholic outcast received back in his community in full citizenship, and above all, to watch these people awaken to the loving presence of the God that AA give them in their lives. And if God is principle, he won't do one thing for anybody, he won't do for everybody. AA's 12 steps are a group of principles, spiritual in nature. When if practiced, will expel the obsession of drink and enable the sufferer to live a happily and usefully whole life. I love y'all. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. You got my adrenaline pumping. Thank you, Tim, Joe. Thank you. That was a fantastic presentation. I realize and listen, you guys, we've got something in common other than our alcoholism and our common recovery from it. I too have been in Club 12. Must have been back about 1986. I spent several months in San Antonio. I recall there was a man that attended every meeting that I went to in there, and he introduced himself as Traveling Hank from Odessa. And after several months, I says, why don't you just move to San Antonio? You're here as much as I am. And he says, well, then I wouldn't be Traveling Hank from Odessa. So anyway, thank you, people. Thank you. We're going to take a 15-minute break. If you're on the West Coast of the United States, grab a sandwich. When we return, JS of Sedona, Arizona is going to give us his presentation of AA history, where it all began. And that'll be interactive. You'll be able to ask questions. So take 15. And again, Tim, Joe, thank you. And for those who would like to make contact with Tim and Joe, they've graciously given their contact information in chat. Take advantage of that. And we'll see you back.
Thank you. Nope.
Hi. Hi, Nikki. Right, okay.